Bills down another player on defense, this time not due to injury. Plus, the team gets ready to face on former teammate Stefon Diggs and other former Bills. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast, everyone.
And I'm Andy Young. It was a love fest, as it has been for the Bills and Stefon Diggs. Makes you wonder why they traded him in the first place.
It's incredible, Andy. What went wrong? Interesting to hear from Josh Allen when asked about if he's talked to Diggs during the offseason. And he said, no, that just happens in the NFL. A player moves on to another team, you lose touch. I've said that with countless coworkers of ours who have moved on. If I don't see you on a daily basis, eventually we'll text a little bit, and then eventually we won't be in touch anymore, unless, of course, you know how to play golf. But we'll get to that in a little bit, Andy.
You don't know how to play golf, but somehow you still end up out there.
Shot a 45, Andy, on the back nine the other day.
Not too shabby.
Ousted one of our friends. Used to sit right there. At any rate, we'll jump off. We'll just get to the Von Miller stuff right off the bat. Andy, I don't know if it's just me or my personality or whatever, but I thought we were all expecting something to happen at some point this year with what happened last year. No one is saying that the two are connected, but you do have Von Miller suspended by the NFL for 4 games. So he's gone for a month just when he was starting to come back around to classic Von Miller, perhaps shaping out to be the Von Miller, maybe not of old, but a lot better than last year. I don't know why it surprised me when it was announced, but the more I sat on it and the verbiage of what the suspension is, in my mind, I went, oh, yeah, I forgot something like that might be coming last year, because when it happened, the domestic violence incident with his girlfriend down in Texas, again, nobody has said that that is what this is about, but my mind recalls this feeling of, well, we're just going to put it off till next year. That's a next year problem.
I think people kind of forgot about it a little bit just because no charges had ever been filed to this point. Miller said during training camp that his legal team considered it case closed and that he was good to go. But that didn't mean the NFL wasn't still doing its own investigation.
The NFL is never just done with anything.
And the NFL takes a long time with these things, with their private investigators. Whether he's charged with a crime or not, they look into what they believe happened and talk to witnesses and do all those sorts of things. So this could be that. Sean McDermott said, I can't get into the specifics as to why Von Miller was suspended. The NFL has not announced that officially. So that leaves people wondering, did something else happen in the meantime? I'm guessing it's probably related to that past incident. But people get all fired up, especially Bills fans, when Rashee Rice gets in all kinds of trouble for the Chiefs, and he's still out there playing. These things take time. Sometimes they take years before the NFL lays down any sort of punishment. Sean McDermott said they respect the league's decision, and it is what it is. Have to move on, and it's next man up.
Yeah.
Which it's been all for 4 years, it feels like, with the Bills.
Well, even at that, Andy, talking to A.J. Epinesa after practice, and, everyone's quick to point out this defense has been dealing with a lot of this stuff due to injury over the past couple of years, and now this is just another situation, a lot different because it's not injury-related. But again, you see it at the linebacker position, the safety position. Now it's affecting the edge rusher position, that position that someone's going to have to step up for the next month or so. And, hope for the best when Von Miller gets back that he's still on that trajectory going up from his recovery from that knee injury.
You look at like Javon Solomon. He's probably one of the first guys that comes to mind. Miller had been having a good season, right? 3 sacks through the first 4 games, much more of a presence in the pass rush than he was at all last season until the last couple of games where you saw some little sparks and flashes. So it's definitely a hit to the Bills' defense, but they were using him primarily in a pass rush specialist role. I think against the Ravens, he only had 9 snaps, because they were getting run over. Didn't make a whole lot of sense for him to be out there setting the edge in the run game. That's what guys like Epinesa, Casey Toohill are used for, DeJuan Smoot. Solomon's more of a pure pass rusher. A little undersized, maybe not the biggest guy to be setting the edge against the run, but if you need a guy on third down who can pin his ears back, use his quickness and speed to get around the edge, he may be the guy you're looking for. So you probably figure he's going to get some more snaps, or at least a chance to play a little bit more against the Texans.
You think Bobby Babich sets it up for less of players rotating in and out, and you're going to see more of Rousseau and Epinesa in there?
That's certainly a possibility.
A lot more, or do you think it just goes to Smoot and Solomon are now rotating in with Rousseau and AJ?
I mean, they had six defensive ends, edge rushers, whatever you like to call it, up for the game the last 2 weeks. So,
right.
I mean, between Smoot coming back, Casey Toohill, Javon Solomon, you're going to have a host of different players that they're going to give a crack at it. So, I mean, we'll see how Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott want to handle it, but I think you might see some increased snaps, especially on key pass rushing situations, especially if it gets late in the game.
Yeah.
And it's a tight game and they need it. Maybe you get a little more of Rousseau, maybe a little more of Epinesa at that point in the game. But maybe earlier in the game, you see some more Javon Solomon. We'll see.
You have some decent quarterbacks coming up as well that they're going to have to deal with and going to have to move on both sides of the ball, Andy, from that debacle that happened down in Baltimore. The good news is, and we'll start with Terrel Bernard, middle linebacker, for the Wednesday practice before this upcoming Texans game. No more red non-contact jersey. He was out there in a regular jersey, still limited. And then Taron Jonson, still in the red contact jersey, but limited. But, Andy, both players spoke to the media following the Wednesday practice leading up to this game, which tells me both of them are almost ready to go. Maybe Bernard good to go this weekend, and maybe Jonson comes in. But who knows? I mean, when we talked to Jonson, he was like, I don't know. It could be this week. But you see that red non-contact jersey, and you're like,
Right. Just that seems to make me want to think that Bernard is a little bit ahead of Taron Jonson. And this might be the week where you see Bernard. It's interesting because I think McDermott said after the game on Monday, right, that Bernard was a little bit ahead of Taron Jonson in terms of who might be back first.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the week where we see Terrel Bernard, and maybe then next week it's Taron Jonson as they kind of ease Jonson back into it. Bernard, of course, wearing the regular jersey and doing most of the things at least that we could see during the media viewing portion of practice, which isn't a ton, and it's stretching and individual position work. And then Taron Jonson wearing the red non-contact jersey, but he also had a big pad.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
On his forearm that he injured, and I believe he told Joe Biscaglia of The Athletic that he did crack his forearm. So, I mean, you got to patch that up, right? You got to put some padding on there. But he didn't. I don't know. You were over there. I don't think, though, that he took part in any of, like, the tackling bag drills or anything like that.
No, but here was one of the funny things, because it was noticeable that when he was catching balls, as they do off to the side, he kept throwing the ball back with his left hand. So he was asked after, is that because you're favoring your right hand, you don't want to do that? And he just smiled and said, I'm left-handed. No one's ever noticed that, but yeah, I've always thrown it back with my left hand.
Oh, that's great.
So let's not read too much into that. But I still think with that pad there, Andy, I mean, I remember going back, and I'm not trying to go Al Bundy and talk about playing high school football, but I played a number of years with kids who were on defense who had a cast on.
Right.
Who had like a full cast.
It just, to me, is how much more damage could he do to it.
Right.
And pain tolerance as well.
Yeah.
If he's still dealing with pain, it makes it difficult to tackle guys. If every time you're going to do that, it feels like you broke your arm again.
And you don't want him to get worse. So if it can't get worse,
right,
and you can deal with the pain, then you move on from there.
I think, though, you're probably going to see it next week. Otherwise, if it's the week after or the week after that, then they should have just put him on IR.
Right.
But some of the media members were having a discussion, Sal Capaccio from WGR, our former colleague here at Spectrum, John Scott, now at Channel 2, that perhaps part of the reason they didn't put him on IR was, one, they had his backups already on the roster. They didn't have to call anybody up. And Cam Lewis and Jamarcus Ingram would then become the next couple of guys in line at nickel corner. And then also salary cap. So if you call somebody up from the practice squad or you sign a guy, you got to pay that guy, and they're tied up against the cap. So if they didn't necessarily need it, maybe IR didn't need to happen because then they don't have to pay an extra guy if they were just going to play guys they had anyways. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting thought. But I would think probably Bernard this week and I know nothing, insider information. It's just me talking.
We're just throwing it out. That's all we're doing.
And then probably Jonson the next week, but both could play this week. Neither could. I don't know.
And now Taylor Rapp in concussion protocol, and that's all we really have on that as far as the safety goes. So the defense continues to deal with injury and you just can't have it all together at one time.
They cannot catch a break as far as injuries and suspensions and all those sorts of things.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you have Cole Bishop probably as the next man up for Taylor Rapp.
Right.
With DeMar Hamlin. Is that what the combo that you really want right now? Makes you wonder if maybe that Micah Hyde call might be coming. I don't know.
Do you see them doing that? I
thought all along that when he didn't retire officially,
right,
and that they keep saying the door is open, that it's for this exact reason. They get into October, November, and two safeties are banged up and they're hurt and they need a guy. Hey, Micah, come on down. You didn't have to do training camp. You didn't have to practice all this time. You know the defense. Step out there and play.
You and I are going to be driving home after this podcast tonight, and the phones are going to start going crazy. Did you guys know about this? Did you guys see this, that he's coming back? Yeah, keep refreshing, Andy.
I'm always looking at Twitter while we do this podcast for breaking news of some kind because inevitably there is some. But
well, the whole Von Miller thing happened while John and I were out here.
Yeah, so, I mean, Micah Hyde, I'm not saying I think it's going to happen, but I still would not rule it out. But for now, Cole Bishop, who is a guy they obviously were high on, you take him in the second round. They said he had a lot to live up to and a lot to figure out going into training camp. Then he was hurt, and that put him behind the 8 ball. But, hey, you got to do what you got to do. You go out there and play. You let your instincts take over, and you try to figure it out against a very good Houston Texans team.
He had a up and down, we'll say to be nice, night when he came in against the Ravens.
I mean, who had a good night against the Ravens, really?
Hold on. No one.
Okay.
In fact, Tyler Bass cost my dad some cash, man.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
He'll be okay, Andy. But that $2.50 bet was going to pay off nice if the over hit.
Oh.
But thank you, Tyler Bass.
Maybe some of that money would have went to you.
One could hope I could get like 50 cents out of it or whatever.
Right.
The big news is, and you get wrapped up in this Stefon Diggs stuff, Andy.
Yeah, we wanted to just touch on the Von Miller and the injury stuff right off the top because we knew the Diggs stuff was happening, and it's been a talking point all along.
Everyone's had the game circled on their calendar. I'm sure people are traveling down to Houston to catch this game. Houston's in baseball fever right now with the Astros, although I don't know how the baseball playoffs are actually going. But I didn't realize how many other players were still there that used to be on the Bills roster.
The Astros lost today, 5-2 to the Tigers.
See?
And
that's done.
They're gone. They're
gone.
Now they can turn their full attention to the Houston Texans.
Everything on the Houston Texans right now then. But yeah, Stefon Diggs, the big deal, going down, how did he leave Buffalo? Did he force his way out? Was he a problem in the locker room? All these questions that will never be answered. But the question to all the Bills players now is, You guys are going up against former teammate Stefon Diggs. And I'll start with Allen because, of course, Allen makes the best point of all, which everyone knows, but they were supposedly buddy-buddy, like best friends, played Fortnite together or whatever the heck that video game was that they were playing a few years back.
Cover of Sports Illustrated for kids.
That's right. Yeah. They were besties. And Allen was asked, if he still talks to Diggs, and Allen's like, I haven't talked to him since he left the team. But he also pointed out that this is the NFL, like we talked about off the top. But Allen also pointing out that he doesn't go up against Stefon Diggs. So while it's your former teammate, your former buddy, you're no longer together, it's more of the defensive guys that are going to have to deal with it and the defensive coaches. But I think, a good chunk of Josh Allen's press conference was about Diggs and just non-answer after non-answer.
And Josh is good at that.
And he knows it.
Right.
Like, you can look
at him. He's got that wry smile on his face while he's giving these answers. Look, they're over it. They've been over it. Obviously, things went awry between the two sides.
Yeah.
I called it a divorce.
You did.
During my story today that's airing on Spectrum Local News. But they're ready to move on, right? They're going to keep getting asked about it until it's not a thing because this is the moment, right? Like when on the schedule, everyone knew the Bills were playing the Texans this year. Then the schedule comes out, and like you said, everybody kind of circled that.
Yep.
The Texans are one of those teams that everybody's been pretty high on because they're very talented. And Diggs goes in there, and he's having a nice run so far. And he has talked that I'm not going to talk about my old girlfriend with my new girlfriend. He's going to leave that stuff inside closed doors.
Smart move.
Whatever. Obviously, things didn't work out. He wasn't happy here. He talked a little bit about that he was at a low point mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same thing happened to him in Minnesota. He wears out his own welcome, right? He gets sick of the place, and he gets sick of the people, and they didn't win the way he thought they should, and he wasn't getting the ball sometimes, I think, the way he should have or thought he should have. And so then they both sides move on, right?
It's ironic, like both of these moves coincide with the Vikings and the Bills starting to lean a little bit more on the run than the passing game. Like it happened both times. That's what happened in Minnesota. That is, James Cook started coming on strong at the end of last season, and Diggs kind of faded away. And, if Joe Mixon starts tearing it up, look out, Texans, baby.
Yeah, I mean, Diggs has had a nice little run to start. 3 touchdowns, had his first career rushing touchdown last week on a broken play that he ended up scoring on, a trick play. That's
don't even
dirty language around these parts.
I've moved on. It took me a few days to move on from that stupidity, but alas.
But, I mean, he's playing more of a different role than he did a little bit with the Bills, a little bit more in the slot. Nico Collins has erupted into a real strong number 1 type wide receiver, and Diggs is a great complementary piece to that. Tank Dell was hurt, but looks like he might go this week. They've got a really nice wide receiver core. You got Mixon there if he plays. I know he's been banged up, and C.J. Stroud is a really strong passer of the football. They got a great defense too, so like McDermott said, like a lot of the guys said, like you could talk about what Diggs was like here and what happened all you want, but that doesn't change the fact that we got to get ready to play these guys.
Right, and like you said, his role won't be what it was here, and that means when you look at the Bills' defense, you're not really talking about Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford manning up on Stefon Diggs and seeing what happens there. You're talking about the other guys on that defense that we have some questions on that are going to have to deal with him as well, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of talented players on that team that's a good team, one that a lot of people pick to maybe go to the Super Bowl or compete or be ahead of the Bills. Maybe the Bills fall back, and the Houston Texans are one of the teams that can take advantage. But, I mean, there's other players from the Bills that have, as you've said, been on this team too, and now we're on the Houston Texans, and you're talking about Tim Settle and Case Keenum and Jerry Hughes.
Jerry Hughes, I thought, retired or something.
No.
I know he went to Houston, But I thought, like, I don't know. Houston Texans are one of those teams that you can kind of forget about every now and then because they're, as far as the league goes, new to the league still. That, if you've been an NFL fan for a while, you don't often think about the Houston Texans off the top of your head when you think about.
No, and like they've had an up and down history. Like they were terrible for a long time, and then they got good for a little bit, and then they were terrible again, and then they got Deshaun Watson, and they were good and beat the Bills in the playoffs 5 years ago now.
Dang.
And then he left, and they were terrible again, and then they get C.J. Stroud, so they ride the wave of franchises.
Yeah. So through the first couple of games with the Texans. No, they lost to the Vikings. I wasn't impressed with their win over the Bears. But again, this is the guy who said last week that I wasn't impressed with what the Ravens had put out there over the first 3 games, and then we all saw what the Ravens were able to do to them. You talk about Diggs now, Andy, now gone from the Bills, and we all know the mentality shift that happened. And Josh Allen has addressed it twice, this whole everybody eats this year thing that they talk about with the wide receivers and the pass catchers was never an attack on Stefon Diggs, that he was here saying, you got to throw me the ball constantly, which he probably was, let's be honest. They're never going to say it. But so now there's this different mentality with the Bills, and it looked good through 3 games. It did not look good against the Ravens the other night, but as you pointed out, no one looked good against the Ravens the other night. But now we have questions on everybody eats is great until they can't feed everybody.
Right. And so the offensive line and the game plan and all those sorts of things are partly to blame for that. The game script, they got away probably from what they wanted to do against the Ravens.
Yep.
And Josh Allen was running around for his life. He hadn't faced that so far really at all this season.
No.
So they got to clean that up. That's number one. Protect Josh and get Cook going more and stick with it.
And Dawkins did not practice.
So that's the other part of this. Dawkins did not practice with a hamstring issue. Sean McDermott was asked, like, is this just them being cautious or is there a real concern he might not be able to play? And McDermott said it's a little bit of both. Right? It's kind of in the middle, somewhere in between there. So that's concerning. That's your Pro Bowl, wants to be first team All-Pro left tackle.
Protects the blind side.
Who's been great
right
for most of his career.
Mm-hmm.
Really strong, solid player and had been ascending.
Yeah.
And then Khalil Shakir didn't practice either with the ankle that he banged up.
So when you talk about everybody eats, the one who was eating the most is Khalil Shakir, and he was really the only one, Andy, if you're a fan or you're watching the game, that there was this feeling of confidence when Josh Allen was going his way that something was going to happen.
Yeah.
Even in like 3rd and long or a situation where a ball, even in the game against the Ravens, who gets wide open downfield while Josh is running for his life, sets up the touchdown to start the second half? It's Khalil Shakir.
Yeah. His streak of consecutive targets without dropping the ball was broken, but he set the NFL record for consecutive passes thrown his direction without dropping it.
It's amazing for a guy 2 years ago we said had a problem dropping the ball.
Right.
It's amazing.
Shakir, if he's out, that hurts big time. Who do you go to?
Because
they already don't have a typical go-to. They feel thin at receiver. Even when Shakir and Coleman and everybody's eating, they still feel thin at wide receiver because they don't have those big-time playmakers. It's just the way they've constructed their roster.
Hey, Curtis Samuel, we hear every week, oh, no, he's about to go. We know we got to get him more involved. But
it hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. And, again, until it happens, it ain't happening as far as I go.
Right.
So if you don't have Khalil Shakir, does Curtis Samuel step into the role and be Khalil Shakir? No.
Maybe.
Do you start doing more of those back shoulder throws to Keon Coleman and try and work your way down the field? And Dalton Kincaid, Andy, I expected a lot more. I know it's 4 games, but I expected a heck of a lot more out of Dalton Kincaid than what they've put out there so far this year.
They just are not philosophically or execution-wise pounding the ball over and over again to one or two guys. It just is not how they've adapted this offense this season. I think Brady said, look, if some game calls for some guy to get 10 targets because he's open every time, that's great. McDermott said the ball finds its way to the guy it's supposed to. Okay. Like sometimes you have to force the issue a little bit, right?
Right.
If you want a game plan to get a guy open because he's your best guy, you have to do that sometimes. And through the first 3 games, they had done a good job of like keeping defenses off balance and kind of not knowing who they're going to. For whatever reason, the Ravens knew exactly what they were trying to do all game long.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Don't get it twisted. The Ravens are really good and really well coached. That's not surprising.
But the Dolphins game and the Jacksonville game especially, like there was talk about the movement pre-snap with the wide receivers to get them going when they got out on their pass route. I can't say that word. Pass route.
Either one's allowed.
Because none of these guys, Andy, are great separators. And we're going to, let's wait and see how this goes. But so far, unless there's a design play or movement or crossing, none of them really get wide open at any point. So I don't know why it felt to me that they weren't doing that as much with the wide receivers against the Ravens.
It's the drop off. I saw some people post the numbers on this. It wasn't as drastic as you think it was, but it still was less. Part of it was that they weren't playing a strict man defense, so that doesn't really a ton of motion doesn't really help you there. If you're just sitting in a zone, all right, this guy runs over here, we shift 2 guys over and we cover it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. They weren't confused by it at all. I still go back to whatever they were trying to do offensively wasn't working because the offensive line didn't hold up. The protection didn't hold up. That's the main key to me because Josh never looked like he was sitting back there comfortable.
Right, which he had in 3 games.
And they also stopped the quick, short stuff, which Allen had done a great job. I think one of the better marks of his career at time to throw, getting rid of the ball quickly. The Ravens didn't allow that either.
Mm-hmm.
But the Ravens are a different team. They play a different style on offense and defense than they'll see. Is that going to be a problem for teams that try to emulate that? Maybe. Is it going to be a problem when they play them potentially in the postseason? Probably.
When do you think the problem is going to be too much where they're going to have to do something? Is it if they go into this game against Houston and the offense, the passing game, isn't clicking for 2 games in a row? If Khalil plays or if he doesn't, either way, because you now have Davante Adams looking to force his way out of Vegas. So naturally,
who wants to leave Vegas?
Yeah. I don't know. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But again, he always forces his way out too. He's almost like Stefon Diggs. So he's looking.
This would be his second time. Diggs has done it twice.
Yeah. He's looking for his trade. You know, obviously Aaron Rodgers and the Jets are they eyeing him to bring him in to help them get back on track? But as far as the Bills go, if you've tried this everybody eats and yada, yada, yada mentality, and it's just all of a sudden other teams have figured out what you guys are doing and you can't execute, is there now a need for the Bills to say, okay, maybe we do need that one alpha wide receiver and go after a Davante Adams?
It's interesting because the reports out there say that the Raiders would consider it. Their asking price is probably like a 2nd-round pick and a mid to late round pick, a 5th, a 6th, something like that. If you're Brandon Beane, number one, can you work it out to figure it out cap-wise?
Yes.
Maybe.
I'm always assuming.
Maybe the Raiders eat some of the money,
right.
Whatever. Do you feel like you're that player away to give up a premium asset, which a 2nd-round pick would be, thinking that, is this guy just going to be a rental and I'm still going to have to replenish my team next year and the year after that? et cetera, et cetera. I don't know.
Don't you want to finally win now?
Well, that's the question. They went all in when they pushed in for Von Miller, and they made trades for Nyheim Hines and did these different things. It didn't work out. So are they trying to take a different tact right now, knowing that, as we said before, we're in this little bit of a reset for them this season? But then you look at it, the AFC still feels wide open. Like,
right.
The Chiefs are 4-0. Do they look dominant? No.
Not at all.
They just keep winning somehow. They're amazing at that.
It's because the refs love Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce.
Yeah. The whole world is sick of the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Everybody loved the Patriots. We'll get into that argument again.
No, but that's my whole thing, is how unimpressive the AFC has looked. And I mean, all around the NFL, it's just been unimpressive for the first month of the season. And the Bills look like that team that could do whatever they wanted, and then they don't. It's tough, Andy. Like, I've gone back and forth on it, but I look at it like this. If you legit think you have a shot, you bring them in, and you have a legit shot at getting and winning the Super Bowl, then you just don't even question it. You just do it.
I'm not interested. I would be considerate if, like, the price gets pushed down to like a third.
Okay.
He's 32 years old, so I'm not really interested in a long-term lucrative deal for him.
Right.
There's an out. His contract runs through 2026, but there's an out in 2025, so after this coming season. So you're basically looking at a rental. I like the idea of going and upgrading your team. Maybe you look at a different guy. Maybe you look at Amari Cooper or somebody else out there who's on a team that might be struggling a little bit and they want to get out from under it. I don't hate the idea because the everybody eats thing, you need some names. You still, like, you're creating a name a little bit in Khalil Shakir. But
I like Mac Hollins, Andy, but
yeah, that ain't it.
You know, I look at the depth chart earlier, and Mac Hollins is actually ahead of Curtis Samuel now on their depth chart that's out there. That it's Mac Hollins. He's an older guy. He's a journeyman wide receiver.
He's making a lot less money.
But get someone in here
right,
so Shakir can play his role.
Yeah, it would be nice to have that outside presence that you can count on.
Right.
Because Coleman, he doesn't separate. He just hasn't got that right now, at least. He may figure it out. I don't know. But that was the archetype coming into this season, and he's lived up to that. He makes some great contested catches, but he's going to have to make a lot of those because he's going to have somebody on his back all the time.
And don't get me wrong, those two catches down the sideline were great by him.
He also dropped one.
He dropped one.
Yep.
At like a key moment in the game.
Right in his hands. Yeah.
Did have a nice little reception over the middle.
I think they do need to do something from a roster construction aspect, though. It's hard to give up a second-round pick for a rental and think that, like, next year we could have 2 second-round picks. We still have a first-rounder. We could trade up. We could get another wide receiver. We could do whatever we need to do. It's hard.
If not now, then when? It's getting to that point with me. If not now.
Just always go all in.
Not always, but
this was the year they weren't going to go all in because they traded away and
But
cut
isn't
the salary
that how
cap.
life works?
Yeah, I guess.
You know, life is what happens when you're making other plans, Andy, and your other plans aren't working, and all of a sudden you have Davante Adams demanding a trade, and you've been through it before. You know what's coming your way. You can deal with it, but you can get a guy in here that can get you to the promised land, finally, with Josh, because I get amazed. Year 7 with Josh Allen now, this is like everything else that happens in life. Time just flies and you don't even realize it. I still view Josh Allen like he's in year 4.
Right.
At the most.
Yeah. I mean, time slips away. You never know when, how long you're going to have, right?
Old men dropping knowledge today.
Yeah. Damn. Like, yeah, you're right. There's that part of you that says, let's just go after it. Let's see if we can make this happen. And maybe Davante Adams or whoever else, Amari Cooper, Darnell Mooney, whoever you might be able to make moves for, make trades for, maybe it's a possibility. I don't know.
We'll see. I mean, you can refresh Twitter and see if anyone's traded for Adams now, but I think there's still time. I don't think it's something that's going to happen right away. Let's get to the game, Andy. Bills at Texans. Bills -1 going into this game. I think it should be higher or lower.
You think the Bills should be a worse underdog?
Yeah.
You think Texans should be favored by more?
Yeah, I'd say 3.5.
All right, so then you're taking the Texans in this game.
Probably.
All right, go ahead. Let's hear yours.
Well, we got the over-under at 47.5, but we'll get to that in a bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to say that this is going to be more of an offensive game, I think. Baltimore's grass. This is another synthetic surface. They can close the roof if it's bad out. I haven't looked at the weather.
Every time I've been down there, it's closed because it's so damn hot.
Okay.
I've covered, I think, 3 games there. It's always been closed.
So I'm looking at 34-28 Texans win.
Wow. And what's the over-under?
47.5.
Oh, you smashed that, dude. Yeah.
Dad, if you're listening, take it.
K-Man, the shock. I would go Bills by 3. So
3 touchdowns?
3 points.
Oh, okay.
Tyler Bass is your hero.
Woof.
Somewhere in the vein of 27-24 Bills.
Okay. All right. I've reached that point after the game with the Ravens. You need to prove something to me that the first 3 games weren't just a fluke because of the matchup. And again, the NFL is matchup all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the Ravens just matched up so well against them, and they'll be able to do what they want more against other teams.
Can I say this? The Bills' defensive game plan against the Ravens was not good.
It was defensive defense.
Well, they stuck in really poor situations and they always play nickel and they always play dime. They didn't help their defense at all.
Right.
Make Lamar Jackson beat you,
Mm-hmm.
right, through the air. You can't just let Derrick Henry pound you to death. He's shown he can do it to you. Lamar, you've had pretty good success against him. So make him beat you in a different way. Stack the box a little more. Do something different. And I would hope the Bills learn from that. I didn't like that game plan whatsoever. Looking back at rewatching the game, that they just put their players in a position not to succeed.
I don't think the Texans are as good as we think they are. I might back out of my
Nope.
No.
Stick with it.
Nope, that's a lock.
Yeah.
Andy, 3 and out. Top teams in the NFL right now. You mentioned the Chiefs already, that they're not even looking great.
The
Vikings are undefeated still.
Yeah, they've looked really good.
They have, but Sam Darnold?
Well, it's a number 3 overall pick.
I understand that, but did he legit finally get it to click?
Or the coaching he had and the teams he was on were terrible.
Good point, Andy.
The Jets. Think about how awful the Jets are. Carolina. Think about how awful Carolina is. He goes to San Francisco and the Rams. He gets a little better coaching, and then he ends up.
Baker Mayfield was there with him in Carolina, too.
And look at Baker's tearing it up,
Baker's tearing it up, too. The Redskins or the Washington football team.
The Commanders.
The Commanders. Old man Carroll strikes again. They've looked impressive,
Yeah.
Andy, the Washington Commanders.
Jaden Daniels is really good. I like him. To me, like the Chiefs, as ugly as sometimes they're winning, they just have that ability. It doesn't matter. They find a way. And they're going to continue to be that until someone bounces them from the playoffs or someone in the damn AFC West rise up and beat them. Will that ever happen? It's what we dealt with here in Buffalo. All those years, the Patriots just won and won and won and won.
I thought with Harbaugh there and the Chargers would get
They
their
gave him
crap
a
together.
tough. They gave him a good game.
Yeah.
The Chargers usually play them tough.
Right.
But man, the Chiefs, they're the best because right now they find a way, even though it doesn't look pretty.
Yeah, it's annoying. Baseball postseason underway, but Pete Rose, Andy, passed away.
Yeah.
Do you think he goes into the Hall of Fame posthumously?
No. He should, but he won't.
I agree with you 100%. I had always thought he belonged in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
I think the steroid guys should be in, too. I don't care about any of that stuff.
Hey, I always said this about the steroid guy. I don't care.
No.
Throw them in there.
It was awesome watching that. Summer of 98, McGuire and Sosa and Clemens and all these different dudes, Palmeiro and Bonds. That was awesome. I don't care.
I was at a Red Sox-Yankees game. Derek Jeter walking up to the plate.
Derek Jeter.
Fenway Park booing like crazy. They called Derek Jeter off the plate and put McGuire up on the Jumbotron for his entire at-bat, and then he hit the home run to set the record.
Wow.
Place went nuts. Like, just think of that back then. You loved these guys.
Yeah.
Place went nuts. As soon as they shut the Jumbotron off, Derek Jeter walks up. It goes from cheers to boos in a half a second.
Yeah.
It was fun.
I don't care that Pete Rose bet on baseball or if he bet on his own team or whatever. I don't care. He was awesome. He played amazingly. He's the all-time hits leader.
Yep.
Hello.
But you're right. He's not going in.
They won't. Hall of Fame voters are stubborn. That'll never change.
Yeah.
He won't go in.
Nope.
He should, though.
I think we're in agreement on that. All right. Stevie Jonson filled in for you last week. I asked him this question.
I wonder why the numbers were better on the podcast.
I wasn't going to say anything.
It's kind of like when I used to fill in for you on the postgame show, and they were much better.
Numbers always better.
Funny how that happens.
Who's the culprit?
Sorry.
Stevie stared at me with this blank look like he had no idea what I was talking about. I thought a lot of people knew that this was a thing. On FX, the Aaron Hernandez story.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it? Have you watched any of it?
I've heard of it. I've seen the trailers. I've not watched it.
I've been watching it. It's like the one FX did with O.J. Simpson where Ross from Friends was Shapiro and they had all those guys in there. And I think Cuba Gooding was O.J. Simpson.
Right. Yep.
So this is a bunch of, I don't really know any of the actors in this. And I don't know how accurate it is, but it's really interesting to watch. And when you know, like, the guys that these actors are playing, to compare them, like the guy playing Tim Tebow and all that other stuff, it's just an interesting watch to me. And I just think a lot more people would have been into this because the documentaries were huge surrounding Aaron Hernandez.
I mean, that story is crazy. The things he did and the people he got mixed up with and the crimes he committed and all those things and what happened to him. It's wild. So, I mean, maybe it's something I'll circle back and watch because it was interesting watching the trial and all those things way back when.
I just thought more people would have been into it, but, at least it's something I can get my wife to watch with me.
Stevie, he's got other stuff going on.
I don't picture him sitting around his living room clicking through looking for something to watch on TV.
Like you still probably go through the cable box and just click channel after channel, right? Till you find something that looks interesting.
I use the guide.
Oh, okay. Oh, you have the TV Guide channel?
Yes, I have the TV Guide channel.
And aside to that, who is a pro wrestling fan who's listening or watching us? Who remembers watching the previews for WWF and WCW pay-per-views on the TV Guide channel on preview before the pay-per-views? It was awesome. They'd have the free-for-alls. It'd be in this little tiny box at the top of the screen.
I remember that.
And then they're telling you, call your local cable operator, 1-900-GET-SPECTRUM.
Dude, remember that?
$29.99.
You do it as a kid and not tell your parents and get the crap kicked out of you for doing it?
That
did happen to me with pay-per-view, but those there used to be this thing called Phone a Friend or Phone Friends, and you would just call into this number, and it would be kids from across the United States.
Just chatting with you?
And the cost of it was absurd, but they never mentioned that. I think some law had to be passed that they had to mention that because of it, but you'd go on and inevitably it would turn into a fight with like someone way far away from where you are, you'd be on there like, well, I'm going to fly out to Utah and kick the crap out of you. Oh, yeah, I don't think you're man enough to do it. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get – and then, you'd hang up and laugh with all your buddies that, oh, I got that guy all worked up. I don't even know how I started talking about this.
I took us down a path because we'd stayed on task. We stayed on topic until right at the end. I used to also watch the pay-per-views through the scrambled picture. You could hear the audio, and you couldn't really see the picture.
What kind of pay-per-views?
WWF.
Oh, okay.
Come on, dude. And I know what you're talking about. You were dialing 900 numbers. It wasn't kids on the other end of the line.
We got to get going.
Yeah. We're going to get fired before this podcast is over. Wrap it up, Kevin.
Hold on. Well, there was screw it.
Hey, before we go, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the podcast, tell your friends, let your dad know. A couple of old guys talking football and scrambled video on pay-per-view.
Reminiscing. Bills, Houston Texans coming up at 1 o'clock. Need this 1 o'clock game coming up on Sunday, Andy. Late nights are getting to me.
It's going to be noon for me down there because they play Central Time.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, early day for us.
Early day, and Stevie Jonson will join us as always for the post-game show, Buffalo End Zone post-game show that comes up right after, and then Andy and I will be back Sunday to break down the game here on the Buffalo End Zone podcast. As always, everyone, thanks for joining us.
Bye.